University professor Michael Eric Dyson discusses his latest book, Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America. His program contains language some may find offensive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Lily. I'm an event associate at Politics and Prose. I'm really glad that you're all here tonight. At P&P, we do events all over the city, from our main store on Connecticut Avenue to our 3 Busboys and Poets locations to the George Washington campus. But there's a special place in our hearts for 6th and I. It's such a joy to be part of this community. This is our first Politics and Prose and 6th and I event in 2017. But we've got an incredibly diverse and dynamic lineup this season, starting tonight and continuing in the next few weeks, first with Paul Auster, and then with Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin, who are the parents of Trayvon Martin. We really hope that you'll join us for those events. And tonight, we are so glad that you've joined us to welcome Michael Eric Dyson, who is a Georgetown professor of sociology, an ordained minister, and the author of 19 books, most recently The Black Presidency, from which he read at Politics and Prose not too long ago. His newest book, Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America, is, to quote Patrick Phillips in the New York Times, a book that should take its place in the tradition of Baldwin's The Fire Next Time and King's Why We Can't Wait. It combines cultural analysis, personal experience, and deep faith, and it is consuming in every way. In the Washington Post, Carlos Lozada wrote that readers will find searing moments in Tears We Cannot Stop when Dyson's words prove unforgettable, and I can second that. This is a book that's going to stick with me for a long time. Dyson is in conversation tonight with Wesley Lowery, who's a national reporter at the Washington Post and the author of They Can't Kill Us All, Ferguson, Baltimore, and a New Era in America's Racial Justice Movement, which we also got to do a P&P event for. So I'm going to turn this over to Wesley. Before I do, please join me to welcome Wesley Lowery and Michael Eric Dyson to 6th and I.
Well, good evening, everybody. We really appreciate you coming out for what is sure to be an excellent conversation about what is a remarkably done, a very moving and compelling piece of writing. Now, when you've written 19 books, I would hope that you start getting pretty good at it. But what we all know is that Dr. Dyson, but what we have all known, let me move that closer, is that Dr. Dyson has been pretty excellent at this for a long time. Now, it would be unfitting, I guess, to start this conversation anywhere else than kind of where we were having it back in the green room prior. We're sitting here 2 days before a presidential inauguration, after a campaign to replace the first black president, and a campaign, that led to the election of a replacement who objectively ran a campaign premised on certainly racial discord, racial unrest, and many would say racism.
Right.
How would you describe and take the temperature of the current moment in this nation as it relates to the ongoing wages of what our current president describes as our original sin of slavery?
Right. Well, first of all, I want to thank Politics and Prose and 6th and I. Made it to the synagogue. I'm balling now. And one of the most gifted and fiercely intelligent journalists and thinkers that we have, Brother Wesley Lowery. Let's give it up for him. Yeah, we are in a fix, a muddle. There are many words we could generate to articulate the sense of misery, social distress, apocalypse, and chaos. And that's just the beginning of the analysis. But it is true that my pastor used to tell me we have already come through what we've come to. So Howard Thurman, the great African-American mystic, said, refuse to reduce your life to the event you confront. This particular event will not exhaust the infinite possibilities of eternity or even time from fulfilling themselves, and for us engaging in behavior that will modify a future that is not yet arrived. In other words, we can contribute to the changing of the society and the scene in which we live by our concerted efforts and actions. So it's not fixed. It's not rigidly predetermined. We might have some theology of predestination that will determine the outcome in advance. But I think that the radical possibilities of human activity can always modify what we think is in the offing. When it comes to President Obama versus Donald Trump, it's too easy to draw the contrast. One man interviewed by the New York Times about the books that informed his own consciousness, the wide range of literacy that articulates one of the most profound sensibilities of engagement with cerebral matters that has ever darkened the Oval Office, right? So we have Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, even if we must begrudgingly or grudgingly acknowledge Woodrow Wilson, bigot that he was, Theodore Roosevelt and FDR, these are men who have engaged in serious and sustained rapport with literate sources. Then we have Donald Trump. I don't know if tweeting constitutes a new form of literacy. It will, in a postmodern moment. The deconstruction of stable narratives of sense and logic, all be damned, and now in their place rises up a conception of episodic interventions. This is the first toddler presidency. And I say that with all due respect to toddlers. Let's be real. Donald Trump has arrived in America for very specific reasons. This is the man who attacked the legitimacy of Barack Hussein Obama for a year and a half, 2 years, with relentless intensity, with remorseless velocity. He shattered the social compact as such as it existed in this nation around a fragile conception of racial comity by intervening with some of the most vicious lambastings of a president known in the last 50 years. A sitting president being subject to such invidious discourse and such hateful rhetoric, challenging his legitimacy as president of the United States of America, and the birther racism by suggesting his birth certificate suggested that he wasn't really an American and that he was hiding something. All of these kind of, this amalgam of conspiracy theory and hateful, vengeful white supremacist thinking. So when you put that stuff together, that concatenation, that concoction as well, proved to be a nasty brew. And yet and still, this is the guy who rose to the top. This is the man that many people in America chose to be president of the United States of America, to be the standard bearer of a party that really rose up against him to begin with. I mean, when we think about Frankenstein, remember, Frankenstein is the name of the doctor, not the monster. Right? That's who created, you're right, whoever created Donald Trump is equally responsible as Donald Trump, the monster himself, metaphorically speaking, Mr. Trump. So the reality is a party created him. When you assaulted Obama and said the first thing you wanted to do is to make him a one-term president, when you got together on the day of his inauguration to say we will figure out a way to make him unsuccessful, you are unpatriotic. My friends, you are not Americans. But you hoist yourselves up on your petard to suggest that Obama was not truly American. Now, what is he? He's a Muslim. He's a socialist. He's a communist. Now, y'all do recognize there are contradictory elements within these assertions. He doesn't believe in God. He believes in too much of one other God. So the whole point is that all of this stuff that they really tried to lay on Obama was the articulation of a venomous fundamental principle. We don't want a Negro in charge. And you can dress it up, and you can try to pretend that it's ideological and political combat. Sure, that's part of it. But at the end of the day, the resurgence and recrudescence of racial animus, of black hostility, is at the root of so much of what we see in response to Obama. And now that he's leaving, don't we miss him already? Like, oh my God, oh my Lord, where are you going? Don't go. It's like Color Purple. Celie, you and I must never part. Don't leave, Obama. Don't. Wait, what you? I don't know, just help him out, Secretary of Common Sense. But Mr. Trump does represent something that is quite interesting, and I'll be quiet here. It is the fact.
I doubt that.
It is the fact that there's a certain kind of metastasizing whiteness, a particular variety and species of whiteness that is inured, that is indifferent to its own innocence, that is hostile to being taken to account for the things it says and does. And in my book, what I try to do is to interrogate the sources of that. Where did it come from? It didn't start with Donald Trump. It began long ago at the basis of this nation, at the beginning of our experiment in democracy. And so what I try to address in that book is where we got it from, what we can do now that he's arrived as the most powerful metaphor for this kind of metastasized whiteness across the body politic that has led to a diseased conception of democracy. Sorry for that metaphor, but that's kind of where I am.
So this book, the subtitle is A Sermon to White America. Mm-hmm. Now, early in the book, page 7, you write, I simply want to bear witness to the truth I see and to the reality I know. And without white America wrestling with these truths and confronting these realities, we may not survive. Mm-hmm. In this moment, whiteness is not a new construct. As you just alluded to, this was not something invented by Donald Trump. It was not invented in response to a black presidency, although it certainly interacted with the black presidency.
Yes.
I think of the phrase that MLK used, the fierce urgency of now. Mm-hmm. What, again, you're right, we might not survive in a world, essentially, in which white Americans are unwilling or incapable of confronting this concept of whiteness and acknowledging the truth and the realities that black and brown Americans see every day.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Look, many white brothers and sisters, perhaps even present here tonight, just a little bit under the skin subcutaneous reaction of being seen as a group. How dare you? They have had the luxury of being individuals. Black folk don't know nothing about that. Right? We all part of the group. If one of y'all did it, all of y'all did it. Mm-hmm. That's why we pray when it's somebody on TV, please don't let it be a black man, please. Just please, not this time. Just don't let it be Bobo or Willie, please. Right? No disrespect. Jose, take some of the blame. Then Latinos are like, don't let it be a Latino. Let it be a black guy. Then all of us together, let it be a white guy with a buzz cut from Nebraska. Yes, right? So the way in which we are born into an almost intrinsic conception of collectivity, that we can never be judged as an individual, that even when we are seen as an individual, we are seen as an exception to, not representative of. The bad things that black people do are seen as representative of the group. The great things we do are seen as exceptions to the group. So we never get the balance right. And many white brothers and sisters are used to thinking themselves not as white, but as human beings. What a luxury. What a beautiful thing. You don't even see your whiteness. That's great. We see it. And what's interesting is that on the one hand, there's an edifying conception of a certain kind of indifference to ethnicity or race. It's beautiful, but on the other hand, it's real dangerous. Because when you have it and you don't know it, and you do stuff with it, it can be real problematic if you don't know how to handle it. Right, you think you got a toy gun, but you got a Winchester. Okay, that's John Wayne-like, but you know what I'm saying, a Glock. Let me be more contemporary. NRA, what's up? So what's interesting is that if you deploy whiteness without knowing you're deploying it, it's problematic. And many white brothers and sisters do not want to be called together to account, even metaphysically or metaphorically, as a group. White America is a trope. I knew, I was on the radio early, and why are you calling us white? Okay. Caucasoid? I mean, I could come up with a non-black, non-brown, non-red, non-yellow, right? Why see us all together? I understand that. I understand that rebellion, but the reality is it's a shorthand. It's a way of engaging a group of people that we know you have diversities and differences and contradictions, many of which are not ascribed to African American people when the shoe is on the other foot or the tongue is on the other side of the cheek. The reality is that white Americans have not been invited and engaged to think self-critically and introspectively about what it means to be white. When we think like men think gender, oh, that's a bunch of women. No, you have a gender too, sir. You're a man. Masculinity can be toxic, we learned, right? You can grab things. You can be predatory. Your misogyny, sexism, and patriarchy can combine to be lethally intense against vulnerable bodies. So men don't think about gender in regard to themselves, and white brothers and sisters don't think about race in regard to themselves. You got a race too, right? Ethnicity is one thing. No, if we bring anything, I'm Italian or Lithuanian or Jewish and Polish and so on, and one is a culture and an ethnicity. And then race, however, is made in the crucible of America, because you could be Italian and Lithuanian and Polish, and you come to America, and in the crucible of race, that Italian identity, that Polish identity is pulverized in the crucible of race and remade as whiteness, because we really can't tell. People don't begin to make those distinctions. Oh, you're from the northern part of Italy, from the southern part, right? And then with Poland, and then you're Greek, and then, all of those resonant differences that make a difference when you're in Europe become less important when you come to America. So you lose the specificity of ethnicity, and race substitutes in a very bland and sometimes wan way, but it also disallows a kind of serious engagement with this social construct called whiteness. Whiteness is a political identity. It's not something you're born with. You learn to become white, and you become white by breathing in the atmosphere of the society that lends certain significance to what that white identity is. And so many white brothers and sisters are resentful, rightfully so, of the ascription of group identity to them, and yet welcome to the world of black and brown and red and yellow people. Welcome to the world of women. Welcome to the world of many minorities in this country, and so, or throughout the globe. So I think it's extremely important for us to wrestle with that notion of whiteness, what it has meant, how it has operated, so that white brothers and sisters become conscious of it, and yes, get a grasp on it, begin to grapple with it, begin to interrogate it, be introspective about it, begin to talk about it in ways that are not defensive or nasty or vicious or putting down others or resentful, but calmly reflective about the existential and political identities that are ascribed to you, how whiteness has been an advantage for you. Some poor white people tell me, hey, you're a rich professor from Georgetown. Well, I'm certainly a professor from Georgetown. That's true. Thank you, President DeGioia. I'm a rich professor from Georgetown. But the reality is that it ain't like Jackie Robinson's children got an exemption from Jim Crow because they were rich. It's not like Joe Lewis's family got an exemption. In other words, rich black people didn't get treated better than poor black people when it came to a white water fountain. So why is it now in the compensatory schema of justice that we say, well, it's not right that black people be heir to certain legacies of benefit and advantage because now you got more money? Because it was never about the dough. It was never about the cash. It was never about the money. It was about the pigment and the color and the culture and the race. And on the other hand, if you're a white person and you get stopped by the police and you don't die, that's the greatest white privilege in the world, at least in America, that you don't interact with a police person and you end up dead. Look, I was in front of Ben's Chili Bowl a few months ago, and 4:30 in the morning, I was doing ethnographic study that night. The bacchanalia of the clubs of D.C., wondering what the young people were engaged in. Let me see myself. So I'm out there, 4:30, and a white kid is going off on the police. You blank, 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 you blank, blank, blank. And I said, oh my God, they're going to shoot him. And then I said, no, he's a white guy. They're not going to shoot him. And this is what the policeman said. Now, son, you're clearly inebriated. You need to go home. All black folk are saying, can we get that? Just can we get that? Like, don't shoot us. Don't stab us. Tamir Rice, you roll up on me and within 2 seconds you have made a snap decision to deprive our children of life? That is the cumulative knowledge. That is the epistemology of fear. It is the projection of stereotype, of unconscious racial profiling on the body of a 12-year-old child. And so what we want is a cessation of the velocity of stereotype and a granting to us of the same humanity that you grant each other. And if we could have that, if white brothers and sisters could tell the truth about that, could grapple with that, I think we'd make a lot more progress in trying to grapple with what it means to be white.
So it struck me as I started reading this book, and this is something I was thinking about throughout it. It's a conversation that many black writers and journalists and thought leaders have very often amongst ourselves, is what is the role of the black public intellectual, the black writer, in engaging a white audience? One thing that came to mind is I remembered a response that Ta-Nehisi Coates had given during a book conversation he was having, and he said, about who his audience was. He was asked essentially, why do white people love you so much, right? And he said, talking about who he writes for, I felt like many of the people I was reading in the 90s and when I was in college were very much burdened by the need to explain to white people, that it affected their language.
Right.
Now you set out in this space with the stated goal and purpose of proselytizing to white people, right?
Yeah.
This was, believe it or not, titled a sermon, right?
Right.
What do you see as the role of black men and black women who are engaged in telling the stories of black trauma and black pain?
Right.
And what is the responsibility of the black writer then to engage with white audiences, with the white majority?
Yeah. No, it's a great point. You know, and look, and I identify with many of my millennial students who say, look, I'm not here to teach you. Speaking to white America, but they talk to me. But they're talking to you, but they're speaking to me. I'm not here to teach you anything. I can't say that. I'm literally a teacher. Yes, I'm here to teach you. And I get all kind of hate mail from white people who call me nigger. Might as well say it. I got 10 emails today out of my name, nigger this, nigger that. And I'm going, I'm such a nice guy. Could you at least say Professor Nigger, please? I work hard for this PhD from Princeton, bruh. Can you at least shout me out on the pedigree of my Ivy League? So you get that kind of blowback, and you get that kind of animus, and you get that kind of hostility, and some of the letters I get from irate parents, I can't believe you're a professor at Georgetown. You're trying to warp the minds of my children. Yeah, I am, actually. That's my stated goal. Because you done warped them up so bad, beam them up, Scotty. Warp speed of intense malevolence. I got to try to rejigger that thing. I got to try to open those minds up. I got to try to engage them. Yes, I want to warp the warp you've given to them. I want to deconstruct it. I want to challenge it. I want to demythologize. I want to use words that might make you upset because you don't know what I'm saying, and you're really especially mad that a Negro was saying some stuff that you don't understand and cussing you out simultaneously. That's a form of resistance. I come from a different generation than Brother Coates, and I understand that inclination to say, I take the black universe as a norm. Therefore, I don't speak to white brothers and sisters. I've written 20 books. I done got plenty of them kind of books. You want to, you know, I got some books that don't even take into account what the dominant society might think or believe or reflect on in the sense of a cultural starting point. But my job always as a scholar is to think critically about this. And see, I'm a little bit more suspicious about the fact that even as an intellectual, it's not that we all agree about certain things. What it means to be an intellectual is to be a cantankerous individual. You know, herding cats. That's why intellectuals can't ever change the world. We can write about what changed it, but we ain't gonna be on the forefront. Now, some of us are. I've been, you know, I march, and I was in the march on Washington here this past Saturday, and I've been involved in getting arrested and so on and so forth, not as a summer job, but as a real thing. And no disrespect. But I also know that what it means to be suspicious and skeptical as an intellectual is to be suspicious and skeptical of even your own formations, of your own thinking, of your own thoughts, of your own surety, of your own certitude, right? That's what it means to be an intellectual, is to raise questions about it. It is not that you don't land on a particular ground and assert your position and willing to defend it. But it does mean that you're a bit more skeptical about the certitude with which it is articulated. You got to have a little bit more humility about, I could be wrong. I mean, I think I'm right and I believe this is the position, but I'm willing to engage and negotiate. It's the difference between a Barack Obama who was willing to say, I'm going to reach across the aisle, even though I had many disagreements with President Obama and argued with him, especially in the book I wrote less than a year ago about his presidency. But at the same time, that's a different gesture of openness than one like Donald Trump, where I know the deal and I know what to do and I have all the answers. So as a public intellectual, as a thinker, I think what our responsibility is to raise questions that are troubling, both to the dominant culture. Don't have to explain to them, although in this book I'm preaching, because I'm trying to proselytize. I'm trying to convert people. I'm unapologetic about that. Ta-Nehisi Coates is not a believer, and I understand that. And there are virtues and there are ranges of truths that can be generated from that. But I come from a different tradition. I come from a side of the aisle. I'm trying to reach you. I'm trying to talk to you. Yes, I want to explain to you. If you don't understand, let me break that down for you. Because I feel sympathetic to some white people to go like, look, you throw me in the river, I'm trying to swim in blackness, but can you give me a lifeboat? Can you give me something to hang on to? So I think out of generosity and out of a genial spirit and an affable spirit, we ought to engage people about what we think, because we don't all think alike. Some black people think one way, some black people think another way. Some are individuals, some think about the collective process of groups. Some people are not curious about or concerned with the impact of a certain stereotypical representation of culture. Others are only obsessed with that. So there's an infinite variety, not infinite, but there's a great variety within blackness itself. But in this book, as you know, I also not only talk about white brothers and sisters, I talk about light versus dark. And maybe white brothers and sisters don't know. I feel like you're in church. Turn to your neighbor and say, light versus dark is big in black America. You happen to have two, yellow Negroes, one good looking, the other another guy. And so, the light versus dark, my daddy was blue-black. I saw how Negroes looked at him. I saw how he was judged, some ape, some simian, and that's among black people. Some curious about him, don't let your children play too long in the sun, they might get darker. Or don't let your dark-skinned child marry another dark-skinned person because of the animus against blackness that we had internalized. So I deal with that too. I deal with the class differences. I deal with the homophobia. I mean, these are all kind of percolating forms of bigotry and tribalism that narrate themselves at the heart of our own self-consciousness, and I want to grapple with that as well. But at the end of the day, I am about unapologetically trying to tell white brothers and sisters in this book, this is what I think the deal is, this is what I think you need to do, and I think I'm trying to answer at long last the question that the young white woman asked Malcolm X when she came to him with a good heart. The young white woman had asked, what can I do? And Malcolm X is famously to have said nothing and then turned around. I understand sometimes you feel like that. It's that kind of day. You're a leader, you're black, God darn it. I got to tell y'all again for the 8 millionth time, I get it. But my disposition is if somebody asks, talk to them. If somebody wants to know, speak to them. Because as a man, I want to know certain things about feminism. I'm sure I'm a dumb guy when it comes to this, and I've tried to be an enlightened feminist. But I know, like white liberals, I do things, look at my anti-misogyny. Look how great a man I am. I'm with you women. And then I'm just re-articulating patriarchal perspectives left and right. God dang it. It's tough out here. So we're trying to interrogate what that might mean. So when white brothers and sisters are asking, I think we ought to reward that curiosity. But not simply curiosity, we ought to reward their desire to know how to do better. But we also ought to challenge. We can't just take you in and say, oh, that's great. Because there's some white folk who take refuge in the fact that I'm not like that Donald Trump. But Martin Luther King Jr. said white liberals can be some of the biggest problems and obstacles because they already are convinced of their essential rightness and that they are on the right side, and therefore that blocks them from doing the serious work of interrogating how enlightened liberal racism perpetuates itself too. So those are the kind of things that I think are important, and I'm just a born preacher. I've been preaching for a long time, so that's just what I be doing.
For those who haven't picked up the book yet, it's structured as a sermon, which,
Yes,
as the grandson of a Baptist minister, I could appreciate. And
Thank you, sir.
So after the call to worship, you go into the hymns of praise.
Right.
And to open up this section, and this section of the book shouts out KRS-One, Lauryn Hill, Tupac. This is a book, by the way, dedicated to Beyonce Knowles and Beyonce Knowles Carter, excuse me.
Right.
Solange Knowles and to Tina Knowles as well.
Right.
And this section opens with a quote from W.E.B. Du Bois, which I really liked. It says, "What are these songs? What do they mean? They are the music of an unhappy people, of the children of disappointment. They tell of death and suffering and unvoiced longing toward a truer world." Now, one thing you grapple with in this book is, and this will be a two-part, I'm sliding extra questions in.
Yes, sir.
One thing you grapple with is this idea of truth. At one point you write, whiteness is not real, it is still true. Getting to this point you're talking about earlier, this concept of whiteness, this social structure, even though we know race is an invented concept overlaid into our lives, right?
Yes.
Can you talk for a second about why you began in these hymns of worship by exposing your white parishioners here to black culture, to these hymns that deal with the police, that deal with oppression, that deal with pain and trauma, and why is that an essential doorway into understanding blackness?
Well, that's a fine mind operating right there. That's a great point. I'll take the latter first, and then I'll back my way in inferentially into the second. You know, I think that white brothers and sisters hear some of this music, and bless their hearts, they're like, and it's not their hearts, bless their hearts. You know, they listen to something that's like, I don't even understand it. Well, welcome to older black people, too. They're like, oh, what in the heck are you saying? We come from a generation, at least I do, where Nat King Cole was used for elocution classes at Juilliard. Darling, je vous aime beaucoup. Don't know what to do. If I knew more French, I'd say. You can understand everything you're saying. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Jack Frost nipping at your nose. Yuletide carols being sung by a choir. You can understand everything you're saying. Now you got the measure of the comments, 100,000 to 100,000, 100,000. Excuse me? What in the heck are you talking about, Future? And I love it. I love all that music.
That's an excellent song.
It's a nice little song. It's a nice little song. I don't think Scottie Pippen thinks so, but that's on the other side. Oh, got to get some TMZ up in here. What's up, bro? I feel you. So let those who have ears hear. So what's interesting is that I come from a generation where a certain kind of clarity, a certain kind of logic motivated the sensibilities that were articulated in the music we listened to. There was purpose, there was vision. Not all of it. We get romantic about it. A lot of this stuff was dreck. It was horrible. It was dross. It was not good. It was not gold, right? Aretha Franklin was singing with a bunch of other singers whose names you can't remember because they weren't Aretha Franklin. But then you want to judge Aretha Franklin's, you know, powerful pedigree against some people now when that ain't fair, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that's horrible and a lot of stuff that's great. A little stuff that's great. That's in every generation. So I wanted to start with these songs so that even if people couldn't understand what they're saying something poignant and powerful. When Tupac said, just the other day I got lynched by some crooked cops, and to this day, them same cops on the beat getting major pay. But when I get my check, they taking tax out, so we paying the cops to knock the blacks out. You don't have to be a Marxist theorist to understand subsidizing your own oppression. You paying tax money for cops who then turn around to hurt you. And when he says, somebody wake me, I'm dreaming, I started as a seed, the semen, swimming upstream, planted in the womb while screaming. On the top was my pops, my mother hollering stop from a single drop. This is what they got? Not to disrespect my people, but my papa was a loser. Only plan he had for mama was the blanker and abuser. And even as a seed, I could see his plan for me, stranded on welfare, another broken family. Listen to the agony of Jay-Z. Back then, back when, the police were Al-Qaeda to black men. So when people get riled up like I did this morning on CNN in New York when I said, compared the experience of many black people in terms of police terror to ISIS, how dare you? How dare you? No, you don't understand what I'm saying. I'm telling you that the police have acted arbitrarily, capriciously, and wantonly, and violently targeting certain people with ways and treatments and behaviors they would not give to others. There was an occupying force that happened under the edges of the state, and the first interaction that many black people had with the state was through the police, and they were often vicious and violent. I have been accosted too many times to tell you by the police, calling me nigger, threatening to shoot me, drawing a gun, bringing the butt down on my back, and threatening to kill me. Yes, that is terror, my brothers and sisters. That is terror to us. Yes, the police were like ISIS to us. They were like Al-Qaeda to us because they were visiting violence upon us with no good reason and no justification, and we felt vulnerable. So I wanted that music to resonate. I wanted Beyonce to resonate, right? Beyonce, oh my God, she can't be black, is she? Can she black? Can she be black? Is she black? Does she transcend race? Why is it that, right, that we have to transcend race? Why can't we be black and human? Why can't we be black and universal? I read Martin Buber. Martin Buber doesn't have to cease to be Jewish. Ich und du, I and thou. Abraham Yahshua Heschel doesn't have to give up being part of a pedigree of prophetic expression within a broader Jewish tradition, within a Hebraic conception of humanity. Doesn't have to be de-Jewishized, de-Hebraicized in order to be resonant with a conception of the universal. The particular is the universal. When you ask for a rose and you bring your beloved a rose, as William R. Jones said, in that conception of roseness is the universal norm of what it means to be rose. That's Aristotelian perhaps, and that's a philosophical conception. I don't want to get bogged down into those niceties of distinction, but at the same time, when you bring your girlfriend or boyfriend a rose, you're bringing them the essence of the universal wrapped up in the particular. So why is it that black people have to stop being black in order to be human? And I think that's a problem, and I wanted to challenge that. And I wanted white brothers and sisters to see some of the agony and some of the grief. If Bob Dylan has a Nobel Prize, I can't wait till Jay-Z gets one, and Nas. It's only right that I was born to use mics, and the stuff that I write is even tougher than dice. I'm taking rap into a new plateau through rap slow. My rhyming is a vitamin hell without a capsule. A smooth criminal on beat bricks. Never put me in your box if your stuff eats tapes. Ah, that's nice. Standing by the speaker, suddenly I had a fever. Was it me or either summer madness? Because I just can't stand around, so I get closer, and the closer I get, the better it sounds. My mind starts to activate. Rhymes collaborate. Because when I heard the beat, I just had to make something from the top of my head. So I fell into the groove of the wax, and I said, how can I move the crowd? First of all, ain't no mistakes allowed. There's philosophy and poetry. Talib Kweli said, these cats drink champagne, toast death and pain, like slaves on a ship bragging about who's got the flyest chain. Lauryn Hill said, even after all my logic and my theory, I add a cuss word so you ignorant people hear me. So there is strategy, there's deployment of narrative devices, and I wanted that to come through, but I wanted the pain, the grief, the sorrow, the suffering, the humanity to resonate. And that, to me, to back up to your broader point about what is truth, right? That's a biblical question. That's a philosophical question. You know, I trained at Princeton where a guy named Richard Rorty had been a professor there in philosophy, where Rorty said that reason can no longer be, that philosophy could no longer be the tribunal of pure reason before which other disciplines genuflected in acknowledgement of its adjudicative power. That his rival epistemologies and claims about what's true and not true had to be worked out by an ostensibly objective, an Archimedean point of objectivity outside the flow of human history. And I'm saying we down here with Wes Montgomery, down here on the ground, We don't see, according to Leibniz, subspatia eternitatis. We see down here from the worm's eye view. And in that worm's eye view, that truth is what we make of it. That's what we know of it. And so we say to brothers and sisters, these are the truths that we have had to grapple with. This is the pain and agony that we've been confronted with. This is the mortality that we are forever forced to confront. And when I think about that truth, no, there's not one unyielding truth that will be true now and forever, but there are truths generated within the context of our own existence where we know things to be real, to be true, to be powerful, to operate in a certain way. And if you got the power to make what you believe to be true, you're in a great seat. But if what you do has not been authorized by the state and people look at it suspiciously and skeptically and look cross-eyed at you, then you are seen as a blip on the screen. You're part of an inferior species of thinkers and believers and human beings. And I wanted to challenge some of that stuff, and I wanted white brothers and sisters to think more strategically and more seriously about what that might mean.
Of course. So in the tradition of politics and prose, and it's very participatory setup, I want to open up the floor to questions. And so people who have questions, if you want to begin lining up, I think we've got 2 microphones. And as you get there, I want to try to move through as many as possible. And so, you know, we always say, you know, statements, send them an email, but get your question in real quick. But as people start to line up, towards the end of the book, you go through and lay out what you believe is a pathway forward for white Americans, right? And that consists, I've kind of consolidated it, but of 3 major points. The first is the idea of providing reparation for harm that's been done. The second is you're arguing white people need to educate themselves about both black experiences as well as a history of black trauma. And the third is that white people then have this responsibility to school their own white brothers and sisters in these areas as well.
Right.
I thought that was kind of fascinating. I'm sure that's going to come up in the questions, and so I'm going to shut up and we'll get started over here so we can go back and forth.
I like that summary. I'm going to use that in the future, man. I dig that. Yeah.
Hey, Michael, how you doing?
How you doing there, brother?
All right. You remember me, huh? I'm Kevin McNair from the Washington
Oh,
Informer.
absolutely, sir.
Yeah, bro. So, you know, I've read so many of your things. Sometimes your stuff kind of rolls this way in my head. But given where we are right now in America and the preparation for Friday and thereafter, it's interesting to me that you subtitled this a sermon to white America. And so, are there 2 messages? One for white America, or is black America asked to listen in, or do we have different conversations?
Yes, sir. No, it's a great point. Always good to see you, man.
Thank you.
Great journalist in his own right. Yeah, I mean, look, I done wrote a bunch of books for black people. I'm like Jay-Z. You like my old music? Go listen to the old music. I'm on something new. On to the next one. Somebody bring me back some money. Okay, I'm sorry. And I'm still, but I'm talking to black folk. Black folk love the fact that I'm speaking to white brothers and sisters for them. I've heard from them. People who've read the book. My God, thank you, Jesus. Right? So thank God, Yahweh, the great one, Moses, and everybody else, the Pentateuch and the postmodern gospel. We all together. We're in the same boat. We're trying to struggle for meaning. And so there are many African American people, many black people, many people of color say, finally, somebody's saying what we wanted to be said. So I don't think that they feel that they are devoiced, that they are voiceless here, but they also understand that it's time to also stretch out and engage white brothers and sisters more directly, to direct my language at them. And I use the word beloved throughout here because I don't want white folk to be scared, think I'm trying to beat them down, even though I'm challenging in a very serious way. Right? You know that old saying, God loves you just the way you are, but God loves you too much to leave you that way. Didn't get it right the first time, try again, God. So, you know, Alfred North Whitehead in the evolutionary process of, of process theology aside, the reality is that white brothers and sisters have to come to a sense of who they are over the long haul. And this is providing one particular take of one particular black man thinking about the world in which we live. I'm not exhaustive, I'm not exclusive, I'm not claiming to be the only voice, but I have a voice, I have a perspective, and I think it happens to resonate with a lot of people who happen to identify with me as a black person. also as a black person speaking to a dominant white culture, and white brothers and sisters who can see pieces of their own culture, struggles, and trials in what I'm doing here. So, no, I don't think black people have to listen on the side. I think that with any good sermon, you know, you're going to hit a lot of people simultaneously. Like I said, I got stuff in there about black people in the book, even though I'm speaking to white folk, because I'm always looking out for little chestnuts for my people. What up? I got you. I got you. I got stuff loaded in that is for us, but it's also for the benefit of the broader society. And I think it's important for white folk to see us talking to each other, and I think it's important for black people to understand how we also speak to white brothers and sisters as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for the rap, for the words, for all of that.
Thank you.
I'm hearing folks talk about therapy, leaving the country. I mean, just, you know, it's just going all over the place as far as emotions are concerned. But
Right.
could you offer up maybe 3 ideas around where people should start channeling that energy, that get from being depressed to activated around how do we move forward and move forward together?
Yes, sir. Great
you.
point. Yeah, and thanks for not exposing me as the person who said all 3 of those. But what's interesting, it's tough out here. Yeah, you know, I think I mentioned Howard Thurman, but let me be more specific when he said, you know, that we must not reduce our lives to the event we confront now, that our slave foreparents imagined a different future. They didn't know what it was going to look like, but my God, they imagined a different future. The book from which we draw so much of the metaphoric intensity of African-American Exodus stories from the Hebrew Bible, people ensconced in niches of oppression who imagined their way out of where they were, not them or their children, but their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. So we are giving birth to possibility in the wombs of our minds and souls by nurturing consistently the belief that whatever we're confronting now will not exhaust the infinite capacity for hope. So number one, you know, as my pastor said, we've already come through what we've come to. We've been here before. The reason David could beat Goliath is because David had something in his collective memory. He had dangerous memories. Hey, I beat a bear before. I beat some lions. I could beat this giant. Let me see what I got. And you got to fight the best way you know how. First, they tried to put all that armor on him. Didn't work. A slingshot and 5 smooth stones. You got to fight it. You know, if you're not a person who believes in spirituals, you got to fight it with hip hop. If you're not into hip hop, you got to do it with country music. I love them all. I love the country boys and girls. I love their lyrics, their sense of irony. I love the blues. You know, if you're going to walk across my lawn, at least you could do is take off your shoes. Hey, lady, your husband is cheating on us. So when you think about, or in the country music, when you know, all my exes live in Texas, that's why I live in Tennessee. Or mine, one of my favorites, if I had killed you when I met you, I would have been in jail by now. So the thing is that there's irony and parody and there's signifying going on. The arts are lifesavers. And what we must not do is reduce the complexity of our situation to the event we confront. If for you Donald Trump represents an albatross, the resurgence of an infantile sensibility that is scary, then acknowledge that. But also acknowledge that there are countervailing forces that you must wield, that you must be on your job, on your game, constantly talking, thinking, reflecting. You got to be a bit more active. We were passive under the last guy. We got to be a lot more active. That recessive gene has to come forward again. So I think that's number one. But number two, we've got to also remember there are a lot of people on the other side who are scared too. They don't know what's going on. They're trying to figure it out. And so we've got to, as far as we can, forge links with them in one sense. But at the same time, we got to have honest conversations. Hey, y'all helped to create this stuff too. So we've got to be responsible. Isn't it interesting? We talk about political correctness in everything except speaking to the dominant white masses. Donald Trump, when he says, we can no longer be politically correct. Okay, so do you want to hear the truth about whiteness? No, 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 right? Political correctness is all over white culture. White folk don't have to hear the truth about what black folk really think about you. Or brown folk. You don't really want to hear what people of color really be saying about you. I gave a couple of nuggets in the book. I didn't want to be called a traitor to the race. But black folk and brown folk do something. It's like during slavery when the master came in. Sally, This lemonade sure tastes good today. Oh, I'll put some extra in there for you, massa. Don't want you to get pissed off. It's green too. Little green tea before you knew what green tea was. Spitting in food, aborting babies. Before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my God and be free. Everyday forms of resistance, workers slow down. There were ways in which the practice of resistance manifested itself. So there are ways in which we have to tell the truth about white brothers and sisters, not acknowledging the degree to which they have been invested and asleep at the wheel. All of us have been. I'm not just saying white brothers and sisters, but I'm saying in particular when it comes to whiteness and not holding whiteness accountable. And then thirdly, this is the time when white brothers and sisters got to go to the Thanksgiving meal and confront your people. Now, you know Granny be saying stuff that's crazy. I get it. Here you are. I'm a proud supporter of Black Lives Matter. I've got my NAACP membership, and Granny is calling black people niggas. Oh, my God. Right? I know that's tough. I know it's tough. So you don't have to break her off right there. Look, Granny, I'm going to bust a cap in you right now if you say that again. No, don't do like, because you got to get the turkey first. You got to get the dressing, or the stuffing, as you might call it. Get the macaroni cheese, then bust the cap. No, then you gently and say, you know what, that's not the best way to think about black people. And, you know, you think, look at you mad at Willie, but look at what old, you know, mediocre white cousin who doesn't deserve to be having nothing gets everything. Begin to interrogate, think about, push back on in a way. And that's a metaphor. In white circles, there are things you can do that Wesley Lowery, as good looking, as intelligent, and as powerful, and as a great writer as he is, can't reach. He won't be able to resonate with him because they won't hear him, but they'll hear you. And you have a special responsibility. I charge you in this meeting of minds, in the marriage of our sensibilities. I charge you as a minister, go forth into the world. Go forth into the world of whiteness and challenge it. Try to stay alive and still get paid. Don't be crazy with it now. Don't come to me like, you made me homeless and I have no job and I'm working for you now, Dyson. Jiminy Cricket. No, okay, slow down with that. But do as much as your conscience allows you to do, but move beyond your comfort zones to try to challenge some of that stuff from within. And if we do that, I think we can survive Donald Trump. If we survive Pharaoh, if we survive Herod, if we survive Bull Connor, if we've survived Hitler, if we've survived some vicious, fascist, crypto-fascist assertions, we can survive Donald Trump as well.
We have time to take 2 more questions, everybody.
Oh my God, 2 more questions? Okay, I'll make it real fast. Can we do a speed round of Jeopardy? I'll just go yes, no, maybe, I don't know.
Okay, great, thank you. So my question is kind of about like when you start to embrace like your white brothers and sisters. I've had growing up a lot of like white friends and colleagues who start to hang out so much with black people that they start thinking, I can use the N-word now and I can do this and that. Yeah. And like one of my girlfriends said to me once, it's not fair, you know, you guys have all the cool music and the cool fraternities and sororities, and me, like me being white, I'm just blank. Because essentially in America, like by being white, a lot of people shed their European ethnicity, right. Like the fact that they are an ethnic group, right. And they come from an ethnic group. And I guess my question is, do you see a point in the horizon where we're gonna have to let go of the things that, some of the stuff we love, like the N-word, in order to really get to this other place in humanity where we all recognize race as a construct and we've forgotten about it? You know, how can we let go of race as a construct if we continue to perpetuate it?
Oh, that's powerful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm from a different generation. You look a little younger than me, just a couple years. Looking good.
Thanks.
I think white folk are grown. Grow up. I'm not going to infantilize white people like, you can't use the word nigga. Get over it. Nigga, please. I mean, no, I'm not giving nigga up. I love nigga. And we can do so much with it. Black people get, they're exclaiming, nigga. Or they're mad, nigga. Or they're happy, nigga. Or they're suspicious, nigga. So there's so many ways that are sensual that we use the word nigga, and white folks should have to listen and can't participate. That's just one of the compensatory, if you will, values and virtues of black culture, and it may be one of the individual reparations accounts that I spoke about, that white folk have to hear black people say nigga. And see, y'all invented the term. Don't act like you won't say it. But you don't say it right. You go, nigger. That's not what I'm saying. See, y'all gonna mess it up. Hey, nigger. No, no, no. Don't be doing that. Part of the problem with hip-hop music is that Red Fox, when he used nigger, was saying it on a party record that was in your basement. Now Snoop Dogg is saying it in the world. Japanese people who don't even know the internecine squabbles among black people in America and white folk about those struggles talk about my nigga. So you do have a problem, and you're pointing to something very real. But in America, I do not think we can infantilize white people. Chris Rock said, it's like white people think, oh my God, if I could just use that word, it would fulfill my life. Y'all started it, dog. You were using it when you were lynching people and castrating people. We don't dig that part of the history. So just the same way gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual people use certain terms among themselves, or you're such a F word, or women say you're such a B. I'm around women all the time calling each other B. That's not my word. And if I use it, I would get smacked in my face. They can stand right there and go, did you see this? And I would go, yeah, that bitch. No, 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 no. That's not your word. Now, that's not even a comparable or parallel situation because nigga has a unique register in the context of America. But what interests me is that black people think that words are not powerful and dynamic. When they say, let's bury the N-word. Well, if you bury it like Jesus, it will raise up on the third day. Nigger, I thought I had buried you. I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. That where I am, there you may be niggers too. So, no, I don't think you infantilize white people. You challenge white people. There's some words you can't use. If you use them, you're wrong. You're part of a racist economy, and it's problematic. Within African American culture, yes, there's the permission to do that. And all black people don't believe that black people should use it. Do you actually think by you not using the word that you have therefore denied legitimacy and permission to white folk to do it? You must have super blackness, because that ain't how it works. And guess what? I'll tell this to white people. I'm going to give you a once and for all lifetime bargain right here tonight. You give us all your billions and trillions of dollars, give us all the advantages that accrue to whiteness consciously and unconsciously, and for one day only, you can use nigger as much as you want. Right? If we got the banks, if we got the major institutions, if we are president of every major Ivy League and other school, if we run everything y'all run now, if we do everything y'all do now, you see how ludicrous that is? As Mike Tyson might say, how ridiculous that notion is. The exchange value is not equal. The marketplace of ideals cannot bear it, because whiteness is such enormous privilege that simply to deny the legitimacy of a grown, accountable adulthood to white folk by refusing to use the word nigger around them is to capitulate and to be, in one sense, surrendering to a kind of infantile behavior that has produced Donald Trump. I want the world, I want it the way I want it, I want you to say what I want you to say, and if you say anything other than that, I'm going to be mad. That's the kind of immature whiteness that we need to confront, and I think ultimately to contain and destroy. All right? Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So, in The Souls of Black Folk, author W.E. Du Bois writes the following, and if you don't mind, just to give some context,
Okay.
I'll read a quick excerpt.
All right.
After the Egyptian and Indian, the Greek and the Roman, the Teuton and the Mongolian,
The seventh son.
the Negro is a sort of seventh son, born with a veil, and gifted with second sight in this American world. A world which yields him no true self-consciousness, but only lets him see himself through the revelation of the other worlds. It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro. Two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings. two warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. And my question to you is, to what extent, if at all, do you find the concept of double consciousness, as W.B. Du Bois defined it, to be relevant and or useful to understanding our current social and racial landscape, and perhaps, by extension, your own work?
Yes, sir. Very good. Very sharp. Very sharp. Very sharp. Yeah, that's a great quote. It's a great idea. You got a great voice. Hello, how are you? The Barry White of your generation, sir. Exploit that. You know, Du Bois talked about that double consciousness, the irony of seeing yourself forever through the eyes of the other. Right? Meditate on everything you said there. We don't have time. We could preach a sermon on that. The hermeneutics of Du Boisian double consciousness. What does it mean to forever see yourself through the eyes of somebody else? How white brothers and sisters see you, how Donald Trump sees you, how the government sees you, how the larger society sees you, how they portray you as a first lady who's mean and nasty because you say for the first time in your life you feel good about your country because they're actually giving you a fair shake. And how dare you to see yourself, and you're a Harvard graduate and you're a Princeton graduate, but to see forever yourself through the eyes of the other. And those are the especially fortunate Negroes. What about the average black person who has no standing or pedigree, forever seen through the eyes of somebody else? Not just somebody else, an opponent, somebody who's invested in seeing you in a distorted fashion. Can you imagine during the height of Nazi Germany for Jewish brothers and sisters, Kristallnacht, to be seen through the eyes of rampant fascist and Nazi identities? Well, they were. And what happened when they were is that they were sent summarily to their deaths. They were committed to both physical death, but there was an attempt to kill a culture, to murder an idea, to eviscerate an entire construction of humanity. That's what the consequence is. Speed up to what we think about what Du Bois was speaking about. And I've often thought that one of the, if we do a comparative analysis, I don't want to engage in, and we should be very careful about what the late great theorist Barbara Christian talked about, oppression derby. No, we suffered more. No, we suffered more. No, it was us. No, it was us. You know how when you were a kid, I was poorer than you. I was so poor that. I used to do that. I was so poor that. You know how it is. We couldn't pay attention. Come on now. Laugh at my jokes up in here now. So, but one of the differences in the Holocaust versus slavery is that when it happens in the 20th century, and you've got photographic evidence to a certain degree, and you've got the remark, like Sartre talks about le regard, when you've got visual testimony to the inhumanity and the dehumanizing impulse of a certain culture and people on others. Imagine if we had Twitter during slavery. First of all, the slaves were like, look, this sun hot out here, I ain't picking no more cotton. Can you imagine some of those tweets? Like, no, Facebook, face the book and read it, because I'm done. Imagine if you had some kind of testimony. Maybe white brothers and sisters would feel a bit more empathy for what we dealt with. Maybe if there was a film of a castration or a lynching. We see the postcards that were handed out by white people who were so demented in their own sick racism that they wanted to photograph and therefore visually conjure the infamous renunciation of their humanity by passing out a card to mark their descent into ontological nothingness. So imagine those people being responsible for seeing you. Imagine an administration that gets for the Attorney General a man who called black people niggers, or who thought about them as boys, or who said that the worst offense of civil rights was the people who tried to defend it. Imagine in the West Wing, a bigot, and Howard Thurman said a bigot is a person who makes an idol of his or her commitments. Imagine a bigot in the West Wing whose responsibility is to advise the president who is poisoned by the recalcitrance of a vicious denial of humanity to black people at the fundamental level. And yet it is through his eyes that public policy will look at black people. So yes, I think Du Bois is quite relevant. I think the passage you read, two warring ideals, two unreconciled strivings, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. He acknowledges that residing in that black identity is the answer, the refusal to give up. And when that young woman talked earlier about, you know, having a kind of black reality because whiteness was blank. Well, what's interesting, there's a kind of fetishization of blackness, there's a romanticization of blackness, but to engage real blackness is to see the broad humanity and the depth of our psychic commitment to stability in the midst of all kinds of horror. When those people in Charleston had their loved ones die, and before any state moved, before any agency moved, they offered forgiveness as a preemptive strike against the vicious resurgence and recrudescence of racial hostility, against giving the victory to that other. What they did was flip the script. You have seen us as flotsam and jetsam in the stream of life. You have seen us as something to be cast aside. We're going to make you see us through the eyes of something more divine. And now we offer to you our love and forgiveness in advance to cancel out your lack of humanity. So Du Bois there, Du Bois understood that part of the answer resided in the very humanity of the people who were being claimed to be not human. And when I take a look across the wide span of human history and the epic tide of grief that washes over us now, I am reminded of that simple and yet beautiful majesty of humanity that the average, ordinary black person possesses. And that's why I wanted to preach to white America. Don't shoot us. Don't kill us. You're killing people who are beautiful, wonderful, loving, affirming human beings. Your kids get on the internet and dress up like gangsters too. You did it when you were children. Don't hold to account a person who's growing as the ultimate statement of their identity when you don't get judged by just a little part of who you are. And so, yes, that statement resonates with me and for me, and I think Du Bois across the ages, 1903, when he wrote The Souls of Black Folk, gathering together essays that had been in the Atlantic and the Nation magazine, bringing them together in that magisterial tone to remind us still now that the problem of the 20th century and the 21st is the problem of the color line, and it resides in our activity to make sure we see each other with the grandeur and the simplicity of humanity that all human beings should be granted. Thank you.
They had said two more, but we're going to squeeze one in, and I'm going to nobody tell them that I took an extra question. All right.
Thank you so much. Professor Dyson, I really appreciate your words. I'm a former student of yours from Brown University when I was 18 and really inspired to...
At Brown?
At Brown.
Oh, my goodness.
To start thinking critically about these things, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'm a mother now of a 3-year-old child, and I've been following the confirmation hearings for the Secretary of Education, and knowing that right now American public schools are as segregated as they were in the 1960s, I'm wondering how we can foster a culture of understanding and communication and humanism amongst our children when we're basically growing a generation that doesn't know each other, won't be in school together with one another, and we're kind of recreating the same societies that our parents fought against.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that. You don't look a day older than you were in school. That good black don't crack. and still very intelligent. Yeah, it's dispiriting, isn't it? If we read Sister Jones's, Hannah's, powerful argument about the resegregation of American education, and this gives not the deliberate lie to Obama's insistence. You're the president, you got to say it. Race relations are better under me. Oh, okay. If you say so. But for real though, dog, not so much. Not your fault. You are as genial and affable a black man as will ever exist. And if you don't dig Obama as a black man, ain't a brother been made you gonna really dig. It ain't gonna happen, dog. It ain't gonna happen in this lifetime. Maybe Wesley Lowery. Okay, Wesley is one, all right? And a couple other brothers I met along the way in the hood. Other than that, it ain't happening. So what's interesting is that race relations have gotten worse because Obama provoked a kind of sustained consternation. He flushed the bigots out. So it is to no chagrin and is not to his peril that he would acknowledge that under his administration, the recrudescent racism and the animus renewed against blackness has found a lethal intensity because he was so good at being what he was. A president who was speaking to the needs of the nation. Universal health care, bailed out the automobile industry, put this economy on a sure standing, brought literacy back. If Justin Timberlake brought sexy back, he brought reading back to the White House. The Oval Office was again awash in ideas, gerunds and participles and dangling participles. We're there again. And yet, this vicious resurgence can be attributed to the fact that this extraordinary black man was a point person along a larger trajectory, a flashpoint in a benighted horizon, where his emergence was both evidence of our renewed association with racial progress and the very sign that we refuse to go any further. So when I think about the schools, the resegregation of American education, black and brown kids go to schools at the same level as they did near the Brown versus Board of Education, that's unacceptable. And as the brilliant statement was made by my former student, that how are these kids gonna know each other? Right? They don't play together, they don't talk together, they don't engage each other. Because one of the beautiful things about our nation is that when people of different races and ethnicities and religions and cultures get together and they're kids, they don't know. That's why we know race is a social construct. But when you're kids, you don't even know until your daddy tells you don't play with them, till your mama tells you don't go that way. And even if they don't tell you, they just give you that body language, that nudge, that gestural affirmation of your enclosed and cloistered existence. So we know that race depends upon the society in which we live to give it meaning. And one of the beautiful things about going to school with each other is that you learn to talk to each other and learn to love each other and forge bonds with each other and speak across axes of race and class and sexual orientation. You know, and it's a horror. And I think that the woman who will be confirmed for Secretary of Education, oh my Lord. I don't want white folk to say nothing else about affirmative action. I don't want to hear it, dog. I don't want to hear it. And I'm talking about your narrow concept. I ain't talking about real affirmative action, which is the attempt to redress historic inequities in race and gender. Because in aggregate, when you put other able people and white women into the stew, white people benefit from affirmative action already more than black people and brown people do. That's just number one. That's just the sheer statistic. But number two, I'm talking about the stereotypical notion of what affirmative action is. Hooking somebody up with some stuff they don't deserve. Two words for you: Donald Trump. He done hooked up more incompetent white folk since Gilligan's Island. The Professor and Mary Ann here on Gilligan. Okay, I'm sorry. So now, right, because they could never get off that island. Dude, it's a set in Hollywood. You know how to get off of it? Okay, I'm sorry, that's unfair. So now, You got people, don't tell me they're smart entrepreneurs. What that got to do with education? What does Rex Tillerson really know about being, as Mary J. Blige might say, Secretary of State? And look at the vicious sexism against Hillary Clinton. We didn't even remark on it. We knew about the racism against Obama. We can't even speak about the sexism against Hillary Clinton. It was so normalized that we didn't even remark on it. She was smart. She had more smartness in her little finger than Mr. Trump possessed in the ever-thinning follicular fidelity of his holding on hair. And then, excuse the ad hominem, but I made an exception. And then, here we are. We got all these white folk and a brother. Let's call that let's call it the soft bigotry of bro expectations. So now, we've got people who are incompetent for the job to which they are assigned in charge of the American welfare. The Benjamin Franklin commonweal has now been subverted by the intense metastasization of whiteness gone amok, to be redundant. And now our children are disadvantaged by hucksters and billionaires, a baronocracy, tycoons in charge of what they don't know. And how can the white working class vote for a man who has not only not drained the swamp, but refueled it, filled it up again with some slimy okra and nefarious, scandal-ridden practices, and in the name of, and I want to say to the white working class, this is what I'm saying, Martin Luther King Jr. was in jail in Birmingham, been arrested. The white warden and jailers came to him and said, Dr. King, you're wrong. You're wrong about segregation. You should believe in segregation. We are right. Your demonstrations are wrong. And Dr. King, now let me ask you one thing, my brother. And I gave a speech about having a dream. I had a dream. Right now, I don't want to talk to you about that. I want to ask you what you're making in your wages. Then they told him. He was like, hell, y'all should be marching with us. You are just as bad off as Negroes are. King said that you are just in the same economic boat as us. So what makes a white working class person vote against his or her interests? They keep asking black folk why they vote Democrat. Why are white folk voting Republican? Why are white working class people voting for a billionaire? It's not a populist movement. He lost the popular vote by 2.8 million votes. By definition, that's not populist. That's demographic destiny and geographical, right, contingency based upon an electoral college and the construction of American democracy that turns out to be not what you thought it was. You thought one man, one vote, one woman, one vote. Sorry, it ain't really like that. So now, in the midst of this, white brothers and sisters are confronted with the most egregious example, the most flagrant offense of the stereotypical conception of affirmative action, with people getting the hookup for no other reason that they are white. And they say this is the rebellion of the white working class. There's a brown working class. There's a black working class. There is a red and yellow working class. The very people, and I'll end by saying this and connected to the school thing, the very white liberals who join in with everybody else in a post-mortem of the election. You know what the result is? You know what the lesson is? We should get beyond identity politics. Really? Was that the lesson? Because all politics have identities. If they're yours, you don't see them. All politics from Aristotle and Plato down have been about the nature and before of identity. But that identity was white, and therefore it was ruled universal, and therefore it was seen as human, and therefore it was seen as invisible. And so identity politics, I'm disappointed in Bernie Sanders when he says, hey, it's easier to talk about racism and sexism than it is to talk about Goldman Sachs. Mr. Sanders, I love you, Senator Sanders, but what world you living in, sir? This is why Bernie Sanders on the left was akin to, not the same as, Donald Trump on the right. Older white men who understand race in a specific fashion and who cannot contend with its cantankerous specificity and the scandal that it demands accountability. We know Donald Trump is resistive, but Bernie Sanders was too. He wants to subsume race under class. Race makes class hurt more. White poverty is not the same as black and brown poverty. They've done studies. It's called concentrated poverty. Because when you're white and poor, you have alternatives developed within the society at large. When you are black and brown and poor, there's concentrated poor. The school is poor, the neighborhood is poor, the parents have poor jobs, and the kids themselves are poor, sociologically speaking. So my point simply is this. White working class is an adjective modifying a noun in an ostensibly post-identity politics world when you're appealing to identity politics to get beyond identity politics. White people who are poor and working class have been sold a bill of goods. Speaking of Du Bois, he talked about the psychic wages of whiteness. What white people are told, at least you're not a nigger. You might be poor, you might be working that land, but at least you're not a nigger, you're not inferior. So now they held on to racial animus as a compensatory wage against the barons and the tycoons who exploited them. And what King was saying, we have more in common together. And so I want the white working class to see Donald Trump is not your friend. And the schools of our nation should be the seedbed for the re-education of America. What they become now under the intense pressure of segregation and resegregation is an extension of our blindness and our unwillingness to see. And what you and I must do is to challenge that. Don't just send your kids to schools that are beyond the district, and I know you don't want to use your kids as social experiments, but look out for the children of those who don't have what you have. Make certain that public education reflects the values that you find important. Make sure the tax base can be, if you will, underwritten by your efforts. And where those tax bases cannot be underwritten by your efforts, make sure you involve yourself in politics that change the world in which we live so that the people who are in control will not appoint people like the present Secretary of Education who will reinforce choice, who will reinforce a certain kind of voucher system, but who will cherry pick over public education and leaving the masses of American society and their children unaddressed and therefore severely undereducated. Off the top of my head, that's what I would say about that. Thank you.
The book is Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America by Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Let's hear it one more time. He's going to be around to sign some books.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Very kind of you. Very kind of you. Thank you. Let's give it up for Wesley Lowry. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us. We're going to move straight into the book signing. If you have a number on your ticket between 1 and 150, please join us in line. And there are additional copies of all the books by Wesley and by Michael Eric Dyson in the lobby where you entered. Thank you.
Here's a look at some of the books that are being published this week. The parents of Trayvon Martin, Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin, recount their son's death and their interactions with the legal system in Rest in Power. Republican strategist and author Roger Stone provides insight into President Trump's campaign in the Making of the President 2016. And in Long Shot, three-time NBA three-point champion Craig Hodges shares his struggles as a political activist and professional athlete. Also being published this week, Duke University's Timothy Tyson reinvestigates the murder of Emmett Till in The Blood of Emmett Till. In Pill City, Newsday criminal justice reporter Kevin Deutsch explores how two Baltimore high school students stole more than $100 million in opiates and built a national drug ring. Author Lisa Dickey shares her travels to Russia over 3 decades and reports on how the lives of the individuals she met across the country have changed over time in Bears in the Streets. And Bloomberg News' Brad Stone looks at how technology companies like Uber and Airbnb are changing Silicon Valley in The Upstarts. Look for these titles in bookstores this coming week, and watch for many of the authors in the near future on Book TV on C-SPAN 2.
This is an unprecedented level of hypervisibility, right? There are always moments. Mos Def said that in 1999, and he's speaking specifically to the idea of the explosion of hip hop, right, and the global export of that, and like what does it mean for those particular images, like. Not necessarily Mos Def's form of hip hop, but like all of these images that are being projected to the world. How are we wrestling with the truth of the artist's expression, but also recognizing that that truth is also sometimes born of a form of oppression and stereotyping and flattening of identities, right? How can we reconcile all of those things at once? And that's a very difficult thing to try to do, to respect one's truth and know that that it's influenced by things that you may not, by systems you may not want to be a part of. I think that, the tension of that hypervisibility and visibility is the Central American question, because of the necessity that blackness is to the American identity, right? In order for the United States to operate the way that it does, it needs a bottom, right? Like it's a system of hierarchies, and the capitalism is that, right? It needs an exploitative class, and blackness like white supremacy renders blackness that bottom class, and it's consistent. Always you have that bottom class. The blackness is always there, and we create new racialized groups to exploit and to demonize. Right? We have Latinos, we have Muslims, like these kinds, and at different points, like ethnic groups that are now considered white were also a part of that. So like Italians and Irish, Germans were all exploited classes of people, but their escape was the fact that whiteness needed to reproduce itself, to form strongholds, political and economic strongholds, so to be embraced into that fold, to ensure that blackness is always at the bottom. So there's a need then to flatten those identities and to demonize, to make invisible blackness, the humanity of black people, to the minstrel shows, all of the different like postcards that depict black men being lynched, the eating watermelon and exaggerated features and just like calling us lazy, but all of these different things are the work of ensuring that the humanity of black people remains invisible, but we also need to be seen in terms of having like during slavery, owning one of us was a status symbol, and then like having us be domestics and servants was a measure of one's worth within society. So there's always that tension of like the actual act of being seen, but also having your humanity denied, and that's what the concept of invisibility is trying to get at.
You can watch this and other programs online at booktv.org.